The first sign something was wrong wasn't the diagnosis. It was the way my daughter-in-law smiled while lying to my face. I remember the exact moment because the kettle screamed itself hoarse on the stove and nobody moved to turn it off. We were all standing in my kitchen, my son, his wife, and me, watching steam climb the cabinets like it had somewhere urgent to be. My daughter-in-law's smile was practiced, polite, a little too careful at the corners. My son stared at the floor. And I thought foolishly that this was just another family silence we'd learned to live with. I turned off the kettle and poured the water anyway. Tea has a way of giving your hands something to do when your heart senses danger. "You look tired," I said to my son, keeping my voice light. Mothers learn that tone early, the one that asks without accusing. "I'm fine, Mom," he said quickly, too quickly. His voice had lost its steadiness like a chair with one short leg. My daughter-in-law Claire reached for his arm, not lovingly. Possessively, "We've just been busy," she said. "Work, you know." I nodded. Of course I knew. I always knew what people wanted me to know. That was the day the story began to split in two, the one they were telling me and the one my body already understood. Before all of this, my life was simple in a way that felt earned. I was 64 and had learned how to keep a house humming without noise. Mornings were oatmeal and the radio low. Afternoons were errands, time to avoid crowds. Evenings were books with dog-eared pages and the ticking clock on the wall that my late husband had insisted kept honest time. Our son Larry used to tease me for refusing to replace it. "Time's honest enough without a reminder," he'd say, but I liked the tick. It meant the house was alive. Larry had always been my steady one, not flashy, not loud. He learned to ride a bike without falling once. He married later than his friends, and when he brought Claire home, I tried to welcome her with the generosity my own mother-in-law had never offered me. Claire was sharp, efficient, and kind in public ways, thank you notes, punctuality, neat compliments. She organized holidays like a project manager. She didn't waste words. After the wedding, they moved 40 minutes away, close enough to visit, far enough to feel independent. We settled into a rhythm that felt healthy: Sunday calls, occasional dinners, holidays negotiated with careful fairness. When Claire spoke, Larry listened. When I spoke, Claire smiled. I told myself that was marriage. The first real change crept in quietly. Larry began canceling lunches. Then he stopped answering calls and returned them days later with apologies that sounded rehearsed. "Just slammed at work," he'd say. "I'll make it up to you." His voice carried a faint rasp I didn't recognize. When I visited, the house smelled different, sterile, like cleaning products layered over something sour. The refrigerator was too empty. Larry's clothes hung looser on his shoulders as if the hangers had stretched them out. I noticed everything. I said very little. One afternoon, while Claire was upstairs on a work call, Larry and I stood at the sink washing dishes. He paused, hand hovering over a plate, and leaned into the counter like it might slip away from him. "Sit," I said. "I'm okay," he replied, though he did sit. I waited. Mothers learn patience the way others learn a trade. Claire's footsteps sounded overhead. Larry straightened, rubbed his face, and smiled at me. It was the same smile he used as a boy when he'd broken something and hoped I wouldn't notice. "Larry," I said softly, "are you sick?" The word hung between us. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then Claire's voice drifted down the stairs. "Everything all right?" "Yes," he called back, too loud. "Fine." Claire appeared at the doorway with her phone still in hand, eyes sharp, assessing. "We're good," she said to me before I could ask again. "Just a long week." I felt myself being managed. That night I drove home with the radio off. My hands shook at stoplights. It wasn't fear exactly, it was recognition, the kind that settles in your bones and refuses to leave. The next weeks became a careful dance. I asked gentle questions. Claire answered them before Larry could. "The doctor said it's nothing," she told me once briskly, "just stress." Another time she laughed lightly and said, "You worry too much, he's lucky to have you, but really he's fine." Fine became a wall, smooth, impenetrable. I started noticing absences. Prescription bottles moved from countertops to drawers. Medical mail rerouted, visits rescheduled at the last minute. Claire sat closer to Larry at dinners, her body angled toward him like a shield. If I mentioned a symptom, a cough, weight loss, fatigue, she redirected. "He's always been thin," she said. "You're remembering him bigger than he was." Gaslighting is too strong a word for what she did. It was subtler than that. It was tidying. She tidied away my concerns until they looked like clutter. One Sunday I arrived unannounced. I'd forgotten a scarf at their house and used it as an excuse, though we all knew why I was there. Larry was asleep on the couch at noon, a blanket tucked under his chin. The room was quiet except for the television murmuring to no one. Claire met me at the door, finger to her lips. "He didn't sleep," she whispered. "Please don't wake him." I stepped closer. Larry's face was pale, his breath shallow. I reached out and felt his forehead. "Don't," Claire said sharply, then she softened. "He's just exhausted." I looked at her, really looked. There was something else there behind the efficiency. Fear maybe, or control. I couldn't tell which frightened me more. "Claire," I said, choosing each word like it might break if dropped. "If something is wrong, I need to know." She met my eyes without blinking. "Nothing is wrong." The lie landed cleanly, no stutter, no flinch. I stood in their living room holding my forgotten scarf and felt a door close, not slammed but locked with a quiet, final click. I left without arguing. Dignity is a habit too. That night I sat at my kitchen table with the ticking clock and the cold cup of tea and tried to convince myself that I was imagining things, that I was a mother with too much time and not enough distance, that Claire was protecting her husband in a way I simply didn't understand. But the body knows what the mind resists, and mine was already grieving something I hadn't been allowed to name. The weeks after that visit settled into me like a low fever, never quite breaking, never letting me rest. I went about my days, folded laundry, watered the plants, answered emails from church committees I no longer cared about. But every small task felt like it was happening underwater. Slow, muffled, heavy. I called Larry every morning for a while, not to interrogate, just to hear his voice. Some days he answered. Some days Claire texted back for him. "He's resting. He's in a meeting. He'll call you later." Later became a moving target. When I did hear from him, his voice sounded thinner, stretched. He laughed less. Sometimes he forgot words mid-sentence and filled the gap with silence. When I asked if he'd eaten, he deflected. When I asked if he'd seen a doctor, he paused. "Mom," he said once carefully, "you don't need to worry." That was when I knew something was very wrong. Larry had never told me what I needed. I started keeping a small notebook in my purse, not out of suspicion, I told myself, but clarity, dates, symptoms I noticed. Things said and unsaid, a cough that lingered, a bruise on his arm that Claire explained away as clumsiness, a prescription bottle I glimpsed once, then never again. I wasn't building a case. I was trying to hold on to reality. One afternoon, I invited them to dinner. Claire hesitated on the phone. I could hear her calculating. "Larry's not feeling up to driving," she said. "We'll have to see." "I'll cook something light," I replied. "Soup, he always liked my soup." There was a pause. "We'll let you know." They came late. Larry walked slowly, like each step required permission from his body. He smiled when he saw me, a real smile this time, and for a moment I let myself hope that I had imagined everything. During dinner, he barely touched his bowl. Claire talked about work, about a neighbor's renovation, about nothing at all. She filled the space so expertly it was almost impressive. Larry nodded along, eyes tired, hands folded. "Dan," I said gently, "do you want to lie down?" Claire answered before he could. "He's fine, we'll head out soon." After they left, I washed the dishes twice. The house felt too quiet. The ticking clock sounded louder than usual, like it was counting down to something I didn't know how to stop. That night I dreamed of hospitals. White hallways, doors without handles, voices calling my name from behind walls I couldn't open. I woke with my heart racing and a certainty that refused to fade. The next morning I drove to their house again, this time without an excuse. Claire answered the door, surprise flashing across her face before she masked it. "Oh," she said, "we weren't expecting you." "I know," I replied. "I needed to see my son." Larry was in the bedroom. I could hear him coughing deep, wet, the kind that rattles the ribs. I moved toward the sound. Claire stepped in front of me. "He's resting." "I won't wake him," I said. "I'll just sit." Her jaw tightened. "This isn't a good time." Something in me shifted then, not anger, resolve, quiet, steady, immovable. "I'm his mother," I said. "It's always a good time." She held my gaze for a long second, then she stepped aside. Larry lay propped against pillows, skin ashen, eyes rimmed red. When he saw me, relief crossed his face so quickly it hurt to witness. "Mom," he whispered, "you didn't have to." I sat on the edge of the bed and took his hand. It was colder than it should have been. "How long?" I asked. He swallowed, looked at Claire, looked back at me. "Don't," Claire said sharply, then softer, "Please, we talked about this." I turned to her slowly. "Talked about what?" Larry closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there were tears there, real ones, heavy and unhidden. I didn't want you to worry, he said. Claire thought it was best. The room seemed to tilt. Best for who? I asked. Claire crossed her arms. For him, for his peace. Stress makes everything worse. What is everything? I demanded. Silence stretched. The clock in the hallway ticked. Honest time. Finally Larry spoke. I've been sick for a while. The words landed like a blow to the chest. How sick? Claire interjected. It's manageable. Claire, I said, my voice shaking despite my efforts. Please don't speak for him right now. Larry squeezed my hand. It's serious, Mom. I felt my breath leave me in a slow, careful exhale. Why didn't you tell me? He looked ashamed. I didn't want to be a burden. I laughed then, a short, broken sound. You have been my life's work since the day you were born. Don't ever call that a burden. Claire turned away, pacing. This is exactly why we didn't want to tell you. Look at her, she's already falling apart. I stood, my knees trembled, but I stood. You don't get to decide what I can handle. Her eyes flashed. I'm his wife, and I'm his mother, I replied. Those things are not in competition. Larry began to cough again, harsher this time. I sat back down, rubbed his back the way I had when he was small. What is it? I asked quietly. He hesitated. Then he said it, cancer. The word filled the room, heavy and final. I felt something crack open inside me, not shatter but split like a fault line giving way. How long have you known? I whispered. Almost a year, he said. A year. 12 months of appointments, tests, fear, and I had been kept outside like a stranger. I turned to Claire. You hid this from me. She lifted her chin. I protected him. No, I said, tears finally spilling over. You controlled the story. Her voice sharpened. You would have interfered, questioned doctors, made everything about you. I stared at her, stunned. I would have shown up. Larry squeezed my hand again, weaker now. Mom, please, I nodded. I swallowed my anger and my grief and my need to scream for him. But something had changed. A line had been crossed that could not be uncrossed. That night after I left, Claire sent me a long message, carefully worded, firm, full of boundaries she had decided unilaterally. She asked for space. She said Larry needed calm. She said she would update me when necessary. I read it 3 times, then I closed my phone. For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be cut out while still alive, and I knew deep in my bones that this was only the beginning. After the word cancer entered the room, nothing ever sounded the same again. It echoed in my ears while I drove home that night, while I brushed my teeth, while I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan slicing the darkness into slow, useless pieces. I kept hearing it in Larry's voice, how carefully he'd said it, like naming a fragile object he was afraid might shatter if handled too roughly. I didn't sleep. I made a pot of coffee I never finished and sat at the kitchen table with my hands wrapped around the mug until it went cold. The clock ticked. Honest time. I hated it for continuing. By morning, I had decided 2 things. First, I would not fight Claire in front of Larry again. Whatever my anger, he was already carrying too much. Second, I would no longer accept being managed like a liability. Love does not ask permission to show up. I sent Larry a simple message. I love you. I'm here whenever you want me. He replied hours later. I know, I love you too. Nothing from Claire. The next weeks unfolded in fragments. I learned more from silence than from words. Appointments happened without me. Treatments began without explanation. Larry grew thinner, his voice hoarser. When I asked how he was feeling, he said, okay, the way people say it when they don't want to talk. Claire controlled the flow of information with quiet efficiency. Updates came filtered, delayed, sanitized. The doctor is optimistic, she said once too quickly. Another time, there's nothing new to report. Nothing new became a phrase I learned to fear. I offered to drive Larry to appointments. Claire declined. I offered meals. She accepted once, then stopped responding. I left soup on the porch anyway, rang the bell, and walked away before she could object. Later, Larry texted, "Thank you. It helped." Those 3 words kept me going for days. One afternoon, I ran into my neighbor Ruth at the pharmacy. She tilted her head, studying my face. "How's your son?" she asked gently. The question startled me. "How did you know?" She hesitated. "Claire mentioned it at book club, said he's been under the weather." Under the weather, I felt something sharp twist inside me. Did she say what kind? I asked. Ruth shook her head. "No, just that it's private." Private? Another word that had been weaponized. I smiled and made some excuse, but as I drove home, my hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. Claire was talking, just not to me. She was shaping the narrative, deciding who knew what, when, and how. I wasn't part of the picture she wanted people to see. That night I opened my old photo albums. Larry at 5, missing his front teeth. Larry at 12, holding a science fair ribbon. Larry on his wedding day, eyes bright, hand in Claire's. I traced his face with my finger and felt the weight of years press down on me. I had known him longer than anyone, and yet somehow I had been demoted. The first real rupture came on a Tuesday. I received a call from an unfamiliar number, a woman's voice, professional and calm. "Mrs. Harris, this is Linda from the oncology office. We've been trying to reach Larry. He missed his appointment this morning." My heart slammed against my ribs. What appointment? There was a pause. Chemotherapy. I sat down hard on the edge of the couch. "He has chemotherapy today?" "Yes," she said carefully. "Is everything all right?" My voice failed me. "I'll make sure he gets there." I hung up and called Larry immediately. No answer. I called Claire. It went straight to voicemail. I didn't think, I just drove. When I arrived, Larry was slumped on the couch, pale and sweating. Claire stood over him, phone in hand, frustration etched across her face. "He didn't want to go," she snapped when she saw me. "He's exhausted." "He missed chemo," I said, my voice shaking. "They called me." Her eyes widened just for a second, then they hardened. "They had no right." "They were worried," I replied. "So am I." Larry looked up at me, guilt in his eyes. "Mom, I'm sorry." I knelt in front of him. "Don't be, we're going." Claire scoffed. "You can't just barge in and take over." I stood. "Watch me." The drive to the clinic was silent except for Larry's uneven breathing. I held his hand the entire way. At the office, nurses moved quickly, efficiently. No one questioned my presence. I was just another worried mother, and apparently that still counted for something. Claire arrived halfway through, furious. She pulled me aside in the hallway, her voice low and sharp. "You overstepped." I met her gaze. "You let him skip treatment? He needed rest. He needs to live." The words hung between us, raw and undeniable. She looked away first. After that day, the lines were drawn. Claire tightened her grip. I felt it in the way visits were shortened, conversations monitored. Larry grew quieter, caught between us. I hated that most of all, that my love had become another source of strain for him. One evening, as I was leaving, Larry stopped me at the door. "Mom," he said softly, "Claire's just scared." I nodded. "So am I." He hesitated. "She thinks you don't trust her." "I don't," I said gently. "Not anymore." His shoulders sagged. "I don't want to choose." I cupped his face in my hands, feeling the sharpness of his cheekbones. "You don't have to. This isn't a competition." But in my heart, I knew it already was. Weeks later, I received a text from Claire. "We've decided it's best if you take a step back for a while. Larry needs calm and positivity." I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. Step back from my own child. As if love were a volume knob she could turn down when it became inconvenient. I didn't reply. Instead, I wrote Larry a letter on paper, the old-fashioned way. I told him stories from his childhood, reminded him of his strength, his stubbornness, his kindness. I told him I trusted his choices even when I didn't understand them. I told him I loved him beyond measure. I mailed it and waited. 2 days later, I got a call from the hospital. Larry had been admitted overnight. And this time, no one had bothered to tell me. As I grabbed my coat and keys, heart pounding, one thought rang louder than all the others. If I didn't fight now, I might lose him without ever being allowed to say goodbye. The hospital smelled the way all hospitals do, clean, sharp, and faintly metallic, like fear scrubbed into the walls. I signed in at the desk with shaking hands and forced my voice to stay steady as I asked for my son's room number. The nurse glanced at the screen, then at me. "Are you family?" she asked. "I'm his mother." She nodded and handed me a visitor badge, just like that. No permission slips, no approval from Claire. Larry lay propped against white pillows, an IV threaded into his arm like a fragile lifeline. His eyes fluttered open when I stepped inside, and for a moment the tension in his face eased. "Mom," he whispered, "you came." "Of course I did," I said, sitting beside him and brushing his hair back. It felt thinner, softer. "Why didn't you call me?" He looked away. "Claire thought it would upset you." I closed my eyes for a second, steadying myself. "Larry," I said quietly, "not knowing is what upsets me." He sighed, exhausted. "I didn't want you worrying all the time." I smiled sadly. "That ship sailed the day you were born." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the machine's hum. His hand felt fragile in mine, like it might break if I held it too tightly. I hated that I hadn't been there sooner. I hated that time had been stolen from us, time I would never get back. Claire arrived an hour later. I felt her presence before I saw her, the way the air shifted, the way my shoulders tightened. She stopped short when she noticed me. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "I was called," I replied. "Unlike you." Her mouth tightened. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid. I stood slowly, careful not to disturb Larry. "Avoid what?" "Drama," she snapped. "Stress, you hovering." Larry stirred. "Please," he murmured. "Not now." Claire took a breath, visibly restraining herself. "We'll talk later," she said to me, her tone clipped. Later never came. That night Larry spiked a fever. Nurses rushed in and out. Doctors spoke in hushed, serious tones just outside the curtain. Claire paced the hallway, phone pressed to her ear, making calls I wasn't included in. I sat by Larry's bed, whispering to him, reminding him of ordinary things, how the dog used to steal socks, how he hated broccoli as a kid, how strong he'd always been. At some point he opened his eyes and said, "Mom, if anything happens..." "Stop," I said firmly. "Nothing is happening." He smiled faintly. "You always lie like that." "I always hope like that," I corrected. When morning came, pale and unforgiving through the blinds, the doctor called us into a small conference room. Claire sat stiffly, arms crossed. Larry leaned heavily against me. The doctor spoke carefully, choosing words that wouldn't shatter us outright. Complications, aggressive progression, adjusted treatment plan. I felt the room shrink. Claire asked technical questions, her voice controlled. I listened numb. When the doctor finished, there was a long silence. "I want my mother involved," Larry said suddenly. Claire's head snapped toward him. "What? I don't want secrets anymore," he continued, his voice weak but resolute. "I'm tired." My heart lurched. "This is my care," he said, "and I want her here." Claire's face flushed. "We talked about this." "We talked about a lot of things," he replied softly. "Some of them were wrong." The room felt charged, fragile. The doctor cleared his throat and excused himself. Claire stood abruptly. "You're not thinking clearly." Larry met her gaze. "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months." I said nothing. I didn't need to. The truth was finally speaking for itself. That afternoon, I moved into a chair beside Larry's bed and stayed. I brought books. I brought photos. I brought stories. I watched the way his shoulders relaxed when I read aloud, the way his breathing evened out. I watched Claire from the corner of my eye, how she hovered, how she corrected nurses, how she bristled when they spoke to me directly. She pulled me aside near the vending machines. "You're undermining me," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm supporting my son. He needs consistency. He needs love." She laughed, sharp and humorless. "You think I don't love him?" I studied her then, really studied her, the dark circles under her eyes, the tightness in her jaw. The fear she wore like armor. "I think you're afraid," I said gently, "and I think you're trying to control what you can because everything else feels out of control." Her eyes flickered. For a moment I thought she might cry, then her face hardened again. "You don't get to psychoanalyze me. I get to protect my child," I replied. "Just like you think you are." She shook her head. "You're making this harder." "No," I said. "The illness is making this hard. I'm just refusing to be erased." That night Larry asked me to stay. Claire went home claiming exhaustion. I slept in the chair, my coat folded as a pillow. Every time Larry stirred, I was there. In the quiet hours before dawn, he whispered, "I'm sorry she kept this from you." I swallowed. "I know." "I didn't know how to fix it," he said. I squeezed his hand. "You don't have to fix anything, just let me love you." When Claire returned the next morning, something had shifted. The nurses greeted me by name. The doctor spoke to both of us. Claire noticed. I saw it in the way her eyes darted, the way her posture stiffened. The secret was no longer hers to keep. But secrets once exposed have consequences, and I could feel them gathering, heavy, inevitable, as the fragile balance between us began to collapse. Once the truth was out in the open, it didn't bring peace the way I'd imagined it might. It brought friction. Everything rubbed raw. Larry's care became a shared space where none of us quite knew how to stand without bumping into each other. The nurses spoke to me freely now, updating me on medications and schedules. I wrote things down in my little notebook, careful and precise. Claire watched from the sidelines, her mouth set in a thin line as if every shared detail were a small theft. At first, she tried to reassert control in quieter ways. She corrected me in front of staff. She rearranged the flowers I brought. She reminded me often that she was Larry's wife. "I know," I'd say calmly, "and I'm his mother." We circled each other like that, neither willing to retreat. Larry noticed everything. I could see it in the way his eyes followed our movements, the way his body tensed when voices rose even slightly. One afternoon, after Claire snapped at me for asking a nurse about pain management, he asked her to step out of the room. "Please," he said, "I need to talk to my mom." Claire hesitated, then left, her heels clicking sharply down the hallway. Larry closed his eyes once the door shut. "I hate this," he whispered. "I know," I said, "and I'm sorry." "For what?" "For being part of the stress." He opened his eyes and looked at me, really looked. "You're not," he said. "You're the only thing that feels familiar right now." The words lodged in my chest. A few days later, while Larry slept, Claire confronted me in the waiting area. Her voice was low, controlled, dangerous in its calm. "You're turning him against me." I met her gaze evenly. "I'm not turning him anywhere. He's seeing things clearly." Her hands trembled slightly. "You think I did this out of malice?" "I think you did it out of fear," I replied. "But fear doesn't excuse taking someone's family away." She exhaled sharply. "You don't understand what it's like to watch the person you love disappear." I softened then, just a little. "I do," I said. "I lost my husband slowly, day by day. That's why I know how important this time is." She looked away, jaw clenched. "You make everything emotional." "Because it is," I said. That night, Larry took a turn for the worse. His fever returned, higher this time. Alarms sounded. Doctors moved fast. I stood back, heart pounding, hands clasped so tightly my nails bit into my skin. Claire paced, muttering prayers I'd never heard her say before. Hours passed. Finally, a doctor approached us, face grave but not hopeless. "He's stable," she said, "but we need to talk about next steps." We sat in another small room, too bright, too cold. The doctor spoke of options: more aggressive treatment, palliative care, quality of life, words that felt like weights. Claire nodded, asking questions, her voice steady. I listened, my heart breaking quietly. When the doctor left, Larry spoke. "I don't want any more secrets," he said. "No more decisions made without everyone at the table." Claire stiffened. "I've been protecting you." "I know," he said gently. "But I need my mom, I need honesty." She looked at him, really looked, and something in her face cracked. Tears spilled over, sudden and unguarded. "I was trying to save you," she sobbed. "If your mother knew, it would mean it was real, that you might." She couldn't finish. I watched her, this woman I had come to resent, crumble under the weight of her fear. For the first time, I saw her not as an antagonist, but as another person drowning. "I knew the moment I saw him losing weight," I said quietly. "Knowing didn't make it more real, it just gave me time to love him through it." She covered her face, shoulders shaking. For a brief moment, I thought maybe we could find common ground. Maybe grief could unite us, but fear has a way of reasserting itself. The next day, I arrived at the hospital to find Claire speaking sharply to the charge nurse. When she saw me, she went quiet. "What's going on?" I asked. Claire turned to me, eyes cold. "I've updated Larry's file." "Updated how?" She lifted her chin. "You're no longer listed as an emergency contact." The floor seemed to drop away beneath me. "You can't do that," I said. "I can," she replied. "I'm his wife." I walked into Larry's room, my heart racing. "Did you know about this?" I asked him. He looked confused. "About what?" I told him. His face fell. "Claire," he called out weakly. She entered, defensive. I was trying to simplify things. "You cut my mother out," he said, his voice trembling with effort. "Again, I thought you thought wrong," he said. "I want her on everything. I want her informed. I want her here." Claire's eyes flashed with anger and hurt. "You're choosing her over me." "No," he said, "I'm choosing us over fear." Silence filled the room. Later that evening, Claire packed a bag. She said she needed space. She said she couldn't do this with me hovering. She kissed Larry's forehead and left without looking at me. I sat beside Larry, holding his hand as the door closed. "I didn't want this," he said. "I know," I replied. But sometimes truth doesn't wait for permission. As night fell, I felt the weight of what had happened settle over me. The secret was gone, the marriage was fractured, and my son lay between us, fragile and exhausted. I wondered then, not for the first time, whether forgiveness could survive what had already been broken. Claire's absence changed the room in ways I hadn't expected. The air felt quieter, less brittle. Larry slept more deeply, his breathing still uneven but no longer tight with tension. Nurses came and went, efficient and kind, and for the first time in months I felt like I was allowed to simply be his mother again. But peace, I learned, can be misleading. It doesn't mean the storm has passed, only that it has paused. 2 days after Claire left, Larry asked me to bring him his phone from the nightstand. His hands were weak, his fingers trembling as he scrolled. "She's been texting," he said. I didn't ask what she'd said. I waited. "She's angry," he continued. "She thinks you manipulated me." I exhaled slowly. "Do you believe that?" He shook his head. "No, but I think she's scared she's losing control." Control, the word again. "Mom," he said after a moment, "I need to tell you something I should have said a long time ago." I leaned forward, heart pounding. "When I first got sick, the doctor asked if I wanted you there." His voice wavered. I said yes. My chest tightened. "Claire said it would just worry you, that you'd question everything and make it harder." He swallowed. I didn't fight her. I thought she knew better. Tears filled my eyes, but I kept my voice steady. "Why didn't you tell me later?" He looked ashamed. By the time I wanted to, it felt like betraying her, and then it just kept going. I nodded. "Secrets grow roots if you leave them long enough." He squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry." "I know," I said, "and I forgive you." The words came easily where they hadn't for Claire. That afternoon, the social worker visited. She spoke gently about support systems, about advanced directives, about making sure Larry's wishes were documented. Claire's name came up again and again. Wife, primary decision maker. Larry listened quietly, then said, "I want my mom involved in all of it." The social worker nodded, made notes. I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Being involved meant responsibility. It meant bearing witness to decisions no mother ever wants to face. That night, I drove home for the first time in days. The house felt wrong, too empty, too normal. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the ticking clock until the sound began to irritate me. I turned it off. For once, I didn't want honest time. The next morning, Claire showed up unannounced. She looked smaller somehow, less composed. Her eyes were red, her hair pulled back hastily like she hadn't slept. "I need to see him," she said. I hesitated, then stepped aside. "He's resting, be gentle." She nodded and went in. I waited in the hallway, my heart pounding like I was about to be called into a courtroom. After a while, she emerged, eyes glistening. "He's different," she said quietly, "calmer." "He feels safer," I replied before I could stop myself. She flinched. "You think I made him unsafe?" "I think fear did," I said, "and fear makes us do things we don't recognize later." She leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. "I didn't want to share him," she whispered. "Not with you, not with the world." If no one else knew, it felt like I could still keep him. Her honesty surprised me. It hurt, but it also explained so much. "You can't protect someone by isolating them," I said gently. "Love doesn't work that way." She looked at me then, really looked like she was seeing me for the first time, not as a threat, but as a witness. "Do you hate me?" The question caught me off guard. I thought of the months I'd lost, the nights I'd cried alone. The look on Larry's face when he realized how much had been hidden. "I don't hate you," I said slowly, "but I don't trust you yet." She nodded, accepting it like a sentence. That afternoon, Larry asked us both to sit with him. The sun filtered through the blinds, casting pale stripes across the bed. "I don't have the energy for conflict anymore," he said. "I need both of you, but I need honesty more." Claire took his hand. I took the other. For a moment, we formed a fragile circle around him. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I don't know how to do this without trying to control it." "You don't have to do it alone," I said. Larry smiled faintly. "See, that's all I wanted." But life, I was learning, doesn't reward good intentions with easy endings. That evening, a doctor pulled me aside. His expression was careful, professional. "We've run the latest scans," he said. "There's been significant progression." My ears rang. "We need to talk about timelines," he continued, "and comfort." I nodded, my legs unsteady. "Thank you for telling me." He hesitated. "Has Larry discussed this with his wife yet?" I swallowed. "We're trying." When I returned to the room, Claire was laughing softly at something Larry had said. The sound felt precious, borrowed. I sat down and joined them, knowing that the truth I now carried would change everything again, and this time there would be no hiding from it. The doctor's words followed me back into the room like a shadow I couldn't shake. Timelines, comfort. Language designed to soften the blow, but I'd learned long ago that soft words don't hurt less, they just take longer to sink in. Larry noticed immediately. He always had. Even as a boy, he could read my face better than anyone. "What did they say?" he asked quietly. I looked at Claire. She was watching me too, her expression alert, guarded. For once, she didn't try to intercept the moment. "They want to talk about adjusting the focus of your care," I said carefully. about making you comfortable. Silence settled over us. Larry closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there was no panic there, just a tired, steady understanding that broke my heart all over again. So that's where we are, he said. Claire's breath hitched. No, she said quickly. We don't know that. There could be... Claire, he interrupted gently, please. She stopped, hands twisting in her lap. I want the truth, he continued. All of it, even if it's hard. I nodded. The cancer has progressed, I said. They're worried about how much more your body can take. He absorbed that, nodding slowly. Okay. That was all he said, okay, as if we were discussing the weather. Later that evening, after Claire went to get coffee, Larry asked me to lean closer. Mom, he whispered, promise me something, anything. Don't let her lock you out again, he said, no matter what happens. My throat tightened. I promise. He smiled faintly. Good, I need you. That night I didn't go home. I slept in the chair again, my hand resting on the edge of his bed as if touch alone could anchor him here. Every beep of the monitor felt louder in the dark. The next morning, a family meeting was scheduled. Doctor, nurse, social worker, Claire and me on either side of Larry's bed. The doctor spoke plainly this time. Palliative care, pain management, time measured in months, not years. Claire cried openly now, her control finally shattered. I held Larry's hand and focused on breathing. What do you want? The doctor asked him. Larry didn't hesitate. I want to be home, he said. I don't want to die in a hospital. The word die landed hard in the room. Claire sobbed quietly. I swallowed and nodded. I want my mom there, he continued. And Claire, no more sides. The doctor nodded. We can arrange hospice care at home. As the meeting ended, Claire stood abruptly and left the room. I found her in the stairwell, sitting on the steps, head in her hands. This is my fault, she said when she saw me. If I'd told you sooner, maybe... Stop, I said gently. We don't know that. She looked up, eyes red. I stole time from you. The honesty in her voice cut deeper than any accusation. Yes, I said, you did. She flinched as if struck. But I'm here now, I continued. And so are you, that's what matters. She nodded slowly, wiping her face. I don't know how to make this right. You may not be able to, I said. Some things don't go back to the way they were. That afternoon, Larry was discharged. I followed the ambulance back to their house, my heart pounding the entire way. The home I'd once felt shut out of now weighted heavy with the knowledge of what was coming. Hospice equipment arrived, bed, oxygen, supplies. The living room transformed into a quiet vigil space. I helped make the bed, smoothing the sheets with care I hadn't known I possessed. Claire watched me, silent. The first night at home was the hardest. Larry was restless, uncomfortable. I sat with him, reading aloud from an old book he loved, my voice steady even as my hands trembled. Claire hovered nearby, unsure where to place herself. At one point, Larry reached for her hand. Come sit, he said. She did, and then he reached for mine. We sat like that, three people bound by love, regret, and an approaching goodbye. In the quiet hours, Claire spoke softly. I was so afraid of losing him that I tried to own him. I didn't respond right away. When I did, my voice was calm but firm. Love isn't ownership, it's accompaniment. She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. Days passed in a blur, friends visited, meals appeared. Conversations softened. Larry weakened, but his mind remained clear. We talked about ordinary things, memories, jokes, small plans that would never happen but still felt comforting to imagine. One evening when the house was quiet, Larry asked me to bring him my notebook. The one you write in, he said. I hesitated, then handed it to him. He flipped through the pages slowly, reading dates, notes, observations. When he finished, he looked at me with something like awe. You never stopped paying attention, he said. Never, I replied. He closed his eyes, tears slipping free. I'm glad it was you who noticed. That night after he fell asleep, Claire stood beside me in the kitchen. I don't expect forgiveness, she said quietly, but I want you to know I see what I did now. I looked at her, really looked. The woman who had hidden the truth, the woman who had loved my son fiercely and wrongly. Forgiveness isn't a moment, I said. It's a process, and time is the one thing we don't have much of. She nodded, accepting the weight of that. As I returned to Larry's side, one thought echoed in my mind. Some secrets don't just complicate love, they redefine it forever. The last weeks did not arrive loudly. They slipped in on quiet feet like dusk, changing the light before anyone noticed it was gone. Larry slept more. When he was awake, his voice was softer, as if it had traveled a long way to reach us. Hospice nurses came and went with practiced gentleness, adjusting pillows, whispering updates, teaching us how to help without hurting. I learned how to read his breathing, how to anticipate pain before he spoke it. Motherhood, it turns out, does not expire, it only changes form. Claire tried in her own way to make amends. She deferred to me more often, asked instead of told. Sometimes I caught her watching me with something like regret in her eyes. Other times I saw resentment flicker. Grief is not a clean emotion. It drags everything else with it. One afternoon, while Larry slept, Claire handed me a cup of tea. "You take care of him like you've been rehearsing your whole life," she said quietly. "I have been," I replied. She nodded. "I wish I hadn't been so afraid of that." That was the closest she came to an apology. I took it. The night Larry asked for a family meeting, the house was unusually still. Rain tapped softly against the windows. He wanted the lights low. Candles flickered on the coffee table, their flames steady, reverent. "I don't have much energy," he said, looking between us, "so I'll be brief." I sat on one side of the bed, Claire on the other. "I want to say some things while I still can," he continued. "Things I don't want left unsaid." My heart clenched. He turned to Claire first. "You loved me fiercely," he said, "sometimes too fiercely. But I know it came from fear, not cruelty." Tears streamed down her face. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. He nodded. "I forgive you." Then he turned to me. "You loved me without trying to own me," he said. "You waited when you weren't invited. You showed up anyway, thank you." I pressed my lips together, nodding, afraid that if I spoke I would break apart completely. "I need you both," he said, "but I need peace more than I need perfection." After that night, something shifted. The sharp edges softened. Claire and I found a rhythm, awkward, imperfect, but functional. We took turns sitting with Larry. We shared small tasks without comment. We spoke quietly in the kitchen about medication schedules and meals and memories. But forgiveness, I was learning, does not erase history. It lives beside it. One morning, Larry asked Claire to leave the room. She hesitated, then complied. He looked at me, eyes clear despite the fog of pain. "I need to ask you something difficult." "Anything," I said. "When I'm gone," he said slowly, "will you stay in her life?" The question took my breath away. "Why do you ask that?" I whispered. "Because she'll be alone," he said, "and because I don't want my death to leave another secret between you, this time resentment." I closed my eyes. In that moment, I felt the full weight of what he was asking. To remain connected to the woman who had hurt me deeply, to choose compassion over distance. "I can't promise what I'll feel," I said honestly, "but I can promise not to punish her for loving you badly." He smiled faintly. "That's enough." That afternoon, Larry slept for hours, deeper than before. His breaths grew farther apart. The nurse took me aside and spoke softly. "It may be soon," she said. I sat back down and took his hand. Claire joined me, silent. We didn't speak. There were no words left that mattered. When Larry passed, it was quiet. One breath, then none. No drama, no alarms, just stillness. I felt it before anyone said anything. Mothers know. Claire let out a sound I will never forget, raw, animal, unguarded. I held her as she collapsed, my own grief folded tightly inside me, waiting its turn. The days that followed blurred together, the house filled with people. Meals arrived, cards stacked up on the table. People said things they thought were comforting. "You must be relieved he's no longer suffering." I smiled politely and said nothing. At the funeral, Claire sat beside me. Her hand hovered, unsure. Finally, she took mine. I let her. When it was over, when the flowers wilted and the house emptied, she stood in the doorway, keys in her hand. "I don't know what happens now," she said. "Neither do I replied. She hesitated. "I don't expect you to forgive me." I looked at her, this woman who had once controlled the truth, who had tried to keep my son to herself, who had also loved him deeply. "Forgiveness," I said, "is not a gift I give you, it's a process I give myself." She nodded, tears slipping free. After she left, I sat alone in the quiet house and finally let myself cry the way I hadn't before, loud, shaking, uncontained, for my son. For the time stolen, for the truth that came too late. But as the grief settled, something else rose with it. Clarity. Some wounds don't close neatly, some forgiveness is complicated, but love, real love, endures even when it's been mishandled. And in the end, that was the truth I chose to carry forward.